Okay, so you know how you guys send us stuff sometimes?
Hmm.
Well, this time someone sent in a YouTube transcript. Seems pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's from Jasna with Z Krzysztof Jackowski official, you know that guy.
Sure.
So anyway, the title is Teraz stani siagramni widzdos oceaniczny widzia live.
Whoa.
Yeah, huge oceanic shock, right?
Right away. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and so we're going to dive into this, really try to figure out, what this vision is telling us, what could be coming down the line, globally speaking.
I'm with you. When you look at all this stuff this guy talks about, and I know we have in the past on the show,
Yeah,
it's a lot to sort through.
it is.
We're going to pull out the biggest stuff, the stuff that really makes you think, okay.
Exactly. And I think one of the first things that jumps out right off the bat, the speaker brings up a past prediction of his.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, something about a huge earthquake in Asia, skyscrapers collapsing, that kind of thing. And he says it already happened, like his prediction came true.
I see. So right away, he's trying to show he's got a good track record.
Yeah, like, hey, I told you so, kind of thing.
Right. I've seen things before, and they came true, so listen up.
Mm.
Makes you want to know what else he might have seen.
Sure. Of course, we're not saying everything he says is going to happen.
No, of course not.
You always encourage our listeners to think critically.
Absolutely. Check things out, do your own research.
Exactly. But it's definitely interesting, sets the stage for what comes next.
Yeah, what's he saying about the future?
Well, this is where it gets really wild. He talks about this huge oceanic shock, uses all these intense words, powerful, loud, just paints this picture of massive damage.
Okay, so the huge earthquake out in the ocean somewhere.
Right. And when you hear something like that, it gets you thinking, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. You start thinking tsunamis,
Right.
coastlines getting wiped out, could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Not just where the earthquake actually happens.
Yeah, and who knows what it could do to, like, underwater cables and stuff, all that infrastructure we rely on.
Right, communications could get disrupted, all kinds of things.
Gets you realize how fragile things really are.
It does. But here's the thing. He doesn't say which ocean.
True.
Doesn't give us a date either. Just says it's coming.
Yeah, leaves it kind of hanging there.
Makes you wonder if it's just a general warning or if he sees something more specific but isn't saying it.
Right, keeps you guessing. But then, and this is interesting, he brings up this small earthquake that happened in Poland.
In Poland.
Yeah, like just recently. It was only 2.3 on the Richter scale. Not a big deal, really.
Okay, so why even mention it?
That's what I thought. But he makes a point of saying it wasn't a mining tremor or anything like that.
So a real earthquake, even though it was tiny.
Exactly. I guess it's like he's saying, look, even in Europe, things are starting to shake.
I see. Like a little wake-up call, even though it's not the big one he's talking about.
Yeah, like a little tremor before the tsunami,
I get it. Keeps the idea of earthquakes in people's minds.
And then, boom, he shifts gears completely, starts talking about Ukraine and Trump and U.S. policy and the whole 9 yards.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, this is where it gets really intense. He says that Trump, what he's doing in Ukraine, it's not about making peace, not at all. He calls it a capitulation of America, like we're giving up in this war that's been going on for years.
A war. Well, I mean, there's been fighting in Ukraine, sure.
Yeah, but he's saying it's bigger than that. It's the U.S. and NATO against Russia, and we're backing down.
Backing down. So what does that mean? Like we're giving Russia what they want?
Yeah, like letting them take Crimea, maybe even more. Who knows?
And he sees this as a bad thing, like America is losing its power.
Absolutely. That's the whole vibe I get from this part of the vision. It's not about strategy, it's about surrender.
Wow. So what does that mean for the future?
Well, right after he talks about this capitulation in Ukraine,
Yeah.
he mentions how the U.S. is building up its forces in the Middle East.
So we're pulling back in one place, building up in another.
Exactly. Like we're shifting our focus, or maybe it's even more coordinated,
Could be.
Yeah.
Like we're preparing for something big, and the Middle East is where it's going down.
That's what it seems like. And then he just comes right out and says it.
What, that there's going to be a war in the Middle East?
Yeah, pretty much. He says there's going to be a conflict, potentially involving attacks by Israel and U.S. bases, the whole thing.
Israel and the U.S., man, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right. And he even says it could start as early as April.
April. That's soon.
I know, right? Though he does say that time is illusory in these kinds of situations.
Right, like predicting the exact date is tough.
Yeah, but still, April, that gets your attention.
No kidding. And he mentioned some specific countries too, right?
Yeah, he talks about Yemen, Lebanon, Iran.
Not exactly peaceful places to begin with.
Exactly. So you've got this potential powder keg in the Middle East.
Right.
And he's connecting it to this whole U.S., Russia, Ukraine situation. Like, it's all part of a bigger picture.
So we have potential earthquakes, potential war in the Middle East. What else?
Well, this is where he really zooms out and starts talking about the global implications.
Okay, like how it all fits together.
Exactly. He mentions 3 wars in 3 different countries, all by April.
3 wars.
Yeah, and he says the conflict in Ukraine, it's going to become way more important for Europe.
More important. But how?
Well, a couple of ways. First, he thinks Russia might just stop trying to make peace with Ukraine.
Just like that.
Yeah, and instead they'll want to deal directly with the U.S. with Trump.
So bypassing Ukraine entirely.
Exactly, which would put Europe in a really tough spot, right?
Definitely. And what about the 3 wars? Any clues about where those might be?
No specifics, but it definitely adds to this feeling that things are going to get way worse, way faster.
Yeah, that's scary.
And then he goes on to talk about what might happen inside Ukraine itself.
Okay, like what the people there might experience.
Yeah. He predicts a lot of division, political fighting, unrest, even the possibility of nationalist groups getting really powerful.
Sounds like a recipe for chaos.
It does. And the worst part is he thinks it could lead to the country splitting up completely.
Wow. So not just a war in Ukraine, but Ukraine breaking apart from within.
Yeah, it's a pretty bleak picture, you know? Like everything's falling apart at the seams.
It is. And this whole thing, he keeps saying it could be the start of World War III.
Yeah, that word keeps coming up, Third World War. And it's like, how could we even get there?
Right, it seems so far-fetched.
I know, but he sees the conflict in the Middle East as the catalyst, like that's the spark that sets everything off.
The spark. But how? I mean, there have been conflicts in the Middle East before.
True, but he's talking about something bigger, something that pulls in all the major players.
Okay, so if we're talking about World War III, who's involved? Besides the U.S. and Russia, obviously.
Well, he mentions China, Turkey.
China and Turkey, that's a whole other level.
Right, and it's not just them fighting. He specifically says they might threaten Israel and the U.S.
So adding fuel to the fire, making things even more tense.
Exactly. It's like this chain reaction. One thing leads to another, and suddenly you've got a global conflict.
Man, it's hard to even imagine.
I know, but he's not just talking about fighting. He talks about other consequences, like economic ones.
Oh yeah, like what?
Well, he thinks some countries might actually freeze people's savings accounts.
Freeze them. Like you can't access your own money.
Yeah, as a security measure, because things are so bad, so unstable.
Wow, that's crazy. That would really shake things up.
It would. People would freak out, rightfully so.
I know, it's like something out of a dystopian novel.
Totally. And then there's this other thing he predicts that Putin might betray Trump.
Betray him? But I thought they were on the same side, according to this vision at least.
Right, that's the weird part. It's like, even if they're working together now, something's going to happen, something's going to shift.
So Putin's going to do something that screws over Trump, even if it helps Russia.
That's what he's saying. It makes you realize that in this kind of situation, you can't really trust anyone.
Yeah, everyone's looking out for themselves.
Exactly. Now, let's go back to Europe for a second.
Okay.
He talks about these planes, non-Polish planes, operating from Poland towards Ukraine.
Huh, that's strange. So Poland's letting other countries use their bases to attack Ukraine.
That's how he sees it, and he thinks it puts Poland in a lot of danger.
I can see why. Russia's not going to like that.
Right! It could be seen as a direct attack, even if it's not Polish planes.
So Poland becomes a target, even though they're not the ones actually fighting.
Yeah, and he also mentions that some European country might actually send their own air force to help Ukraine.
Really? That's a big step, a much bigger involvement.
It is. And he thinks those planes might come from Poland, too.
So Poland's right in the middle of all this, whether they want to be or not.
That's the feeling I get. And on top of all that, he predicts the U.S. dollar is going to tank.
The dollar, like our currency is going to lose value.
Yeah, he thinks it's inevitable with all this instability, all these wars brewing.
I mean, that makes sense. When the world's going crazy, people want something stable to hold on to.
Right, and the dollar might not be seen as so stable anymore.
Especially if the U.S. is pulling back from global affairs, like he says.
Exactly. And you know what? In the middle of all this doom and gloom, he actually gives some practical advice.
Oh, yeah. Look what?
He tells people to make, stock up on supplies.
Makes sense. You never know what might happen.
Exactly. He says to get essential medications, water, basic food, the essentials.
Smart. If things really do hit the fan, you're going to want to be prepared.
Absolutely. And someone actually asked him about the Arabian Peninsula, those countries like Jordan, UAE, Qatar, Libya.
Whenever they're safe, I guess.
Yeah, and he doesn't give a straight answer.
So not a yes or no.
No, but he says their fate is tied to what happens in the Middle East, and with the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine.
So basically, no one's really safe if this all goes down.
That's the takeaway I got. And speaking of the U.S., he talks about how Trump will treat Poland and Europe subjectively.
Subjectively, what does that even mean?
Like, he'll make decisions based on his own feelings, his own interests, maybe even how he feels about Putin on that day, who knows?
So not based on, like, treaties or alliances or anything like that?
Exactly. And that's kind of scary, right? Because if the rules don't matter anymore, if it's all about personal whims...
Then anything could happen.
Exactly. And then he brings up this anecdote about the Polish Prime Minister, Tusk, who talked about Ukraine's tough situation and how Poland can face anything, referencing World War II.
World War II, wow, that's a heavy comparison.
It is. And the speaker interprets it as a warning, like Tusk is subtly preparing people for something terrible.
I see. Like he can't say it outright, but he's trying to hint at the danger.
Yeah, it's a pretty chilling thought, you know?
It is.
And then finally, there's this interesting bit about Russia and China.
What about them?
Well, he says that Russia won't betray China, that they're just using the U.S. for now.
So they're playing the long game, Russia and China.
That's how he sees it. They've got this deeper alliance, a shared goal, and the U.S. is just a pawn in their game.
That's a pretty powerful alliance, Russia and China together.
It is, and it could change everything.
No kidding. It's a lot to take in, all these predictions.
It is, but we're focusing on the big stuff, the geopolitical stuff, the earthquakes, remember?
Right, right.
But there are a few other things he mentions. He talks about a vision he had back in 2008 where he saw a huge war and told his daughter to flee to Bulgaria and Romania if it happened.
Bulgaria and Romania, like safe havens.
That's what it sounds like. And then he talks about this feeling he has now, like just before a major conflict, people in Poland and Europe will be afraid to even breathe.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, like the air is heavy with dread, you know.
It's a powerful image.
And then last but not least, he predicts that the price of gold is going to keep going up.
Gold. Why gold?
He says it's because of the global instability, all the stuff we've been talking about, and maybe because of something Trump might do related to gold prices.
So buy gold now while you still can.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah. Oh, and one more thing.
Yeah.
He mentions that there isn't much news coming out of South America, Africa, Australia.
Huh. That's true. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, and he sees it as a good thing. Like, those places are far away from the trouble.
Like they might be spared from the worst of it.
Exactly. So to sum it all up.
Yeah, give us the big picture.
Okay. So we've got this potential for a massive earthquake in the ocean. Who knows where? Who knows when?
Right.
We've got the U.S. stepping back from the world stage, maybe shifting focus to the Middle East, maybe getting ready for something even bigger.
Yeah.
We've got the very real possibility of a major conflict in the Middle East, maybe even as soon as April.
April, man.
And this could be the spark that sets off a global war, World War III, involving all the major players.
With Russia and China on one side, potentially?
Exactly. And all this is going to lead to chaos, economic collapse, maybe even people losing access to their own money.
And borders changing, countries splitting apart, people fleeing their homes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, to be honest.
I hear you. But hey, that's why we do these deep dives, right? To try to make sense of all this crazy stuff.
I guess so.
Yeah?
But it's still a lot to process.
I know. So here's a question for you and for everyone listening.
Okay, hit me.
Out of all these things, all these predictions, what do you think would be the clearest sign, the undeniable signal that things are really changing, that the world is heading towards this really dark future?
Man, that's a tough one. There's so much going on.
I know, right? But think about it. What would be the tipping point? The thing that makes you say, okay, this is it. The world is different now.
I don't know. Maybe if we see a major power, like the U.S., actually pull out of a region completely.
Like abandoning a longstanding ally.
Yeah, something like that. Or if we see a sudden shift in alliances, like China and Russia openly joining forces against the West.
That would definitely send shockwaves.
No kidding. I guess it's something we all need to be watching for, you know?
Absolutely. And how we interpret the news, how we understand the world around us, it all changes when something like that happens.
Yeah, it does. It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It really does. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a wild ride.
It has. And to everyone listening, keep your eyes open, stay informed, and maybe start stocking up on those supplies just in case.
Good advice. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe.